Good morning, Don. Thank you for taking the opportunity to let me interview you today. Do you prefer Don or Donald?
Don.
Don.
Unless you're angry with me, my mother always called me Donald when she was angry.
Did she use your middle name as well?
No, just Donald.
All right.
When she yelled Donald, you knew you were in trouble.
All right.
Don is fine unless you're angry with me.
Well, Don, thank you. And of course, the parameters, of course, for the interview is that I'll be asking you a series of questions about your life for the LGBT History Project, Oral History Project here in Pennsylvania. At any time, if you feel uncomfortable with any questions that I ask, you may choose not to answer. We can end this at any time you like as well. And specifically, we just want you to be comfortable as you answer the questions and really tell us as much about your life as you possibly can. So are there any questions you have of me?
I'm good, Kevin. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. So why don't we start off by telling me where you're from, where you were born and raised, perhaps?
Full name spelled. We've decided we need that on tape. Full name spelled. People don't know what they're doing when they transcribe.
My name is Donald William Fitz. You want me to spell it?
Oh, you don't have to spell that one, I don't think.
Donald William Fitz. I was born August 20th, 1944 in York, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I was born to Francis and Benton Fitz. I was the second of 5 children. The oldest was 6 minutes older than I. I was an identical twin.
Ah.
So there were 5 of us, 3 boys and 2 girls.
And did you grow up in York?
I grew up in York. I went to Dallas area school system. I went to actually a elementary school in Spry, Pennsylvania. It was a brand new school the year I went there. Went there from 1st through 6th grade. There was no kindergarten at that time. And then at 7th and 8th grade, I went to a 4-room schoolhouse in Spry. There were 2 7th grade classes and 2 8th grade classes. And from there, I went to a brand new first year at the Dallaston Area High School. It was a brand new school. I spent my last 4 years at the Dallaston Area High School.
Now, did you go on to college after high school?
Went to Elizabethtown College for 4 years, majored in pre-med biology. I then went to Millersville University on a full fellowship to get my degree in special education. After high school, or after college, instead of going to pre-med school, I had all my applications ready to apply to med school, and I decided to go to Peace Corps. So I spent a year in the Peace Corps in India. When I came back, I got married to a girl from high school, or from college. We were sweethearts in college my senior year. Actually, we were best friends more than sweethearts. We were best friends. We traveled together. We did a lot of things together. And after the Peace Corps, we got married, and I was married for 6 years. 6 years and 2 kids. After I got married, I moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where she was from. Her father was a school teacher. Now this was before I got my master's in special education. Her father was a school teacher, and so when I came back to Pennsylvania and got married, quite honestly, if I hadn't done certain occupations, I would have been drafted. So they were all trying. My parents were trying to get me an education, and her parents were trying to get me education, and a job came open at William Penn High School in Harrisburg. Actually, it was not in special education. It was in physics. So that year, I taught physics at Harrisburg High School, and then my second year there, actually it was physics, and I did some special education that year as well. I got a fellowship to Millersville to get my degree in my master's in mental retardation. That was the title at the time. So I went to University of Millersville for a year, completed my master's, and while I was there, we had our first child.
Boy, girl?
Boy, I have a son and a daughter. My son is has his PhD in polymer science. He is a researcher for Johnson & Johnson.
And your daughter?
My daughter works for the state. She's works for corporate tax collection in the state of Pennsylvania.
Now, you say you were married for 6 years?
I was married for 6 years.
Tell me a little bit about your marriage.
Again, I have to go back to we were best friends. I can never say we were really lovers. We were best friends. We didn't really consummate our relationship until after marriage. I think I better go back a little bit and talk about my interest in men. You know, after I came to puberty and experienced my first ejaculation, actually, that was about, maybe about the age of 11. I thought I broke something. I didn't relate it to any person. I didn't relate it to any individual. I thought I broke something. I thought I probably never, I don't know if it was tied to having kids or, I was very innocent. I was very innocent. Now, my mother, at some point in time, gave all of us a book. It's called How a Baby is Born, and it showed the male and female anatomy. But honestly, when that happened to me, I know that I liked it, but I didn't know what happened. So that happened several times, and you know, I stimulated myself, but I never tied it to other people. I never tied it to male or female. I knew I liked it, and I didn't tie it to any romance. But I've always been in love with women. I've always been in love. Even when I was in elementary school, there were girls that I loved. I ate for. Not sexually though. It was a feeling of love. And the whole way through school, that's, you know, I had long-term relationships with loving relationships with women, with girls. It wasn't tied to sex. My first conscious revelation that there was something between me and men happened sometime while I was in late elementary school. My father was a contractor. He was a building, excavating, and grading contractor, and he had a lot of men working for him and a lot of equipment. And he sponsored a lot of athletic teams. He sponsored basketball, baseball, primarily basketball and baseball. And we would go around to those games, but I never played. And actually, none of us ever played. We were young at that time. None of us ever played those games. But I can recall there was a gentleman on one of the teams. It was a baseball team. His name was Junior. That I just felt there was something in here. I can feel it now. There was something in here that told me it wasn't sexual. I didn't tie to anything sexual. But there was something about him that gave me chills. And I wanted to go back to that game again to see him play. So that was my first experience that there was something between me and the rest of, and other men was, I can't say that I didn't think it was natural. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. I was born and raised into a religious fundamentalist family. We were river dunkers, the Church of the Brethren, river dunkers. We were actually baptized in the river. My mother was born and raised Lutheran, but when she married my father, she joined my father's church, the Church of the Brethren. And they believed the Bible as per se. At least they did at that time. Per se, whatever the Bible stated, that's what happened. My grandfather was a deacon in the church. He wore a black jacket with no collar. He wore a white shirt with no collar. He wore black pants, black shoes, everything. My grandmother wore the long dress. Never cut her hair. She had a tied up on her head and always wore a covering. Women did not go to my church without a covering on their head. We washed feet. The men sat on one side, women sat on the other side, and we washed feet the whole way around the church. We had the Holy Communion where you passed the cup the whole way around the church. It was a very, very fundamental church. No makeup, no jewelry, no movies. Now, we went to church every Sunday, but we didn't relate, my family did not relate to what everybody else was doing in that church. My mother wore makeup. My mother wore jewelry. My mother was, for the time, very much dressed and walked and talked the way everybody, sophisticated women did in that time. But she wasn't an outcast, but she was different from everybody else in that church. Now, when she went to church, she always had the covering on. So we would sit in Sunday school class, and we would hear what everybody else was hearing about this fundamentalist religion. But I can't ever recall growing up hearing anything negative about homosexuals. I never hear anybody, even the word homosexual. Now, there were people that were talked in whispers about, but not to me, not to kids. They would talk to you. I had a cousin by marriage that people said he was a little weird, but nobody ever talked to me about what that meant. But I kind of knew that that was something that it shouldn't be, and it had to do with other men. And I don't recall that any bashing of gays. I don't recall, because it was just, I didn't recall that it even existed. I didn't know that they existed. I didn't know. And that was pretty much my history through the whole way through high school. I started dating girls when I was a freshman in high school. I had a relationship with a girl that, we liked each other. We went out, saw movies together, partied together at my house, at other houses. But there was kissing, but there was absolutely no sexual content at all. It just, I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't relate to it. I had my first serious relationship when I was in high school, and I dated her on and off through high school and through my first year of college. Her name was Sally. She was a cheerleader, and I was a big man on campus. I was involved in the theater. I was involved in music, the chorus. I was a member of the state choir the whole way through high school. I starred in every play that we ever performed in high school. And she was a very popular girl, and everybody just assumed that we were together, but we were on and off the whole way. There were just times when I thought, no, I don't want to be with her. Now, it was always me that broke it up. I always broke it. But there was nothing sexual about our relationship. Now, we made out, we kissed, but there was absolutely nothing sexual about our relationship.
Do you think she may have wanted more sexually?
I don't know, because she never started anything. I don't know. If I had to answer what I thought, or what I think now, probably so. When I say there was nothing, there was nothing. There was petting, but we were never naked in front of each other, ever. So that was the whole way through high school. My brothers were both very athletic, very athletic. They were both championship wrestlers. They would both play football, and I went the other route. I was into music. I was into the theater. But I lived in the country. My dad had 100 acres that eventually he developed. So we were always outside. We spent 8 hours, 10, 12 hours a day outside. We built dams, we climbed mountains, we were always outside. So I was every bit as a male as they were in that. But in terms of athletics, I couldn't throw a ball at you if you... And everybody knew that. In fact, my twin brother and I were always very close. He could finish my sentences, I could finish his sentences. But we were different. He was definitely an athlete, and I was definitely not. I was a student, he was definitely not a student. We were really identical in terms of looks, although because if he was an athlete, he build his body up much more than I did. We were both very popular kids in school. I was aware that I was somewhat different from the other guys in that I simply was not interested in sports. I wasn't. And that was a problem for me. I felt bad about that, but I didn't tie it to anything sexual. At home, when we were out there, we would always be outside playing games, and when we weren't building forts, and if we played baseball or were shooting basketball, my twin brother was called Muscles, and I was called Weaky. I wasn't frail, but people always compared the two of us, and he was the athlete, and they didn't see me in the theater, they didn't see me in music, they didn't. So that bothered me. Then when I went to college, I had to start from scratch, and then I realized I was just as good as the average male was athletically. You know, in intramural sports, I did just as good as everybody else. In high school, I hated gym class. In elementary school, I hated gym class because I was going to be the last one picked. But in college, that simply wasn't true. I was as good as the average guy was. Certainly wasn't the best, but I was not the worst. So I got over that. I said earlier that I fell in love with, I had loving relationships with a lot of women. When I say I had a loving relationship, I mean I had aching relationships where if I thought they were didn't like me, I ached. There was my girl my freshman year of college, her name was Judith. I cannot not tell you how many times I walked in the rain thinking about this girl. We went out a couple of times, but it was never anything. But all the girls that I had those really painful relationships with, it was nothing sexual. I never thought about that. Never. Now, once I can remember in college, my freshman year, I was, I stayed in the dorm, and there were a bunch of us in my dorm that were very, very close. And we always traveled together. We were at a movie theater in Lancaster. We went to see Phaedra. And I remember that movie because this is the first time that happened to me. I went down to the restroom. It was in the lower level of the theater, and there was a man standing there, and he tried to pick me up. I guess that's what it was. And I didn't know how. I got scared. I ran out of there and ran up to my friends and told them about it. And we went in to see the movie, and that was really the first time I've ever come in contact with, that I know of, came in contact with anybody that was queer. That's what they called them at the time, queer. There were 3 of us at college, the first couple of years, that were absolutely inseparable. We were all freshmen. We were all in the same class. They called us the 3 Musketeers. We were all 3 big men on campus. We did a lot of partying. In high school, I never drank. I was very innocent, never drank. But in college, things changed. We traveled. One of the guys had a cabin in the woods, and we'd go down there on weekends. We'd take cases of beer, and I would get drink and get sick, and drink and get sick, and drink and get sick. Well, that's important to the story because on 2 of those occasions, 2 that I can recall, might have been more. Or was I drunk? I was in the car with one of my best friends, and on both of those occasions, he initiated the contact. It was sexual contact, and on both of those occasions, we had gay sex. We both had girls. We were both involved with women. But the interesting thing about that is we were never friends after that. We talked. I was his campaign manager when he ran for a student position. But we were never friends after that.
Now, when you say gay sex, what do you mean by that?
I'm not sure. I know how it started. He was feeling me, but I don't really recall how far it went. I know we ejaculated, but I don't know how far I don't know how far, I don't think that we certainly know anal sex, and I don't know if there was even oral sex. I don't know. I don't recall. But that was something I was definitely not. I was not queer. So I went in the Peace Corps. I was there in India in the Peace Corps. And I was in a small community, very small rural community. But when you exit the Peace Corps, you went, at that time it was Bombay, it's Mumbai. And I was exiting by myself because I lived alone. So I was doing my exiting process in Bombay, going to the streets of Bombay, and I did not speak Hindi, and that's what they spoke there. I spoke Gujarati, but I did not speak Hindi. I was walking the street, and a guy picked me up and took me back to his apartment, stripped me down, and he tried to have anal sex with me. It didn't happen, but I did ejaculate. He didn't know a word of English. I didn't know a word of his language, and he picked me up. That was the second time, the second person that ever happened to. So that was definitely not me. As soon as it happened, as soon as I came, he did not. I jumped out, got dressed, got out of there, and it was not me. It was not me. I was not queer. So I came home, got married. My wife and I had sexual relations, but it wasn't anything that I can't tell you how many times I probably turned her down, because it was just not. I have to go back. I was a pre-med student in college. My freshman year, after my freshman year, I did an internship at York Hospital, where you did every low-level job. In the 1 week you were custodian, 1 week you were an aide, 1 week every week you did something different. That summer I met a student nurse. She was the daughter of a Mr. Universe from York Barbell. And we just connected like we were just really best friends. We hung out, we did a lot of things together, and we started experimenting. And that's when I explored the female body. And we did everything. Certainly there was no romance on either part. She was a virgin, I was a virgin, and we just explored each other. It was just...
Was there a sexual attraction?
I don't know if it was sexual attraction. There was certainly attraction. I definitely loved it. I wanted more, and we did it all summer long. But I can't say that there's anything I lusted after. It was really good. It was really good.
Right. So this
We did everything.
So this progressed to intercourse and.
Yes, yes. And then summer was over, and that was over. She wasn't in love. I wasn't in love. There wasn't love there, like I had experienced before. It wasn't. We just enjoyed each other, and that was it.
So that was the first woman you had intercourse with?
Yes, yes. And during college, I was still dating the girl from high school, and I was really nasty to her. Nasty in that I would just drop her just like that. And then I forget what year I was in college, and I heard she was going to get married, and I thought I'm going to have to pull one of those Dustin Hoffman things, and run up to the church and say no. And honestly, I was torn there. I cannot let this girl get away, but I did. Thank God for her that I did. I let her get away.
And this is the Dustin Hoffman from The Graduate reference?
Yes. I really did feel that way. There were lots of moments where I felt, I can't let her get married. I can't. But I did. So then I met my wife. We started dating my senior year. And we just loved traveling together. We just loved being together. We did a lot of things together, but we did not have sex. We made out a little bit, but not really. Not really. I can recall also my sophomore year. I was with a lot of upper freshmen. And I wasn't dating then. And the guys, my good friends of mine, one of my roommates and some other guys fixed me up with the campus slut, because they thought I needed to get out there and get something. Well, we went out. She was a senior, I was a sophomore. We went out, and then we ended up at her home, and we ended up on her sofa. And I had to finally say, no, this isn't going to work. This was not going to work. It didn't happen. I left, and I can't imagine the stories that she might have told after that. But it didn't happen, and I don't recall ever anybody. I talked about this group of friends that traveled together. One of them I thought was very effeminate. Now, whether or not he was queer, I didn't know. He had a girlfriend, a serious girlfriend. I think he actually married her, but he was very effeminate. So I was kind of cautious about being with him without everybody else around, because none of my other friends were. I don't recall, other than that, I don't recall anything during college about queers or gay bashing or queer bashing. I don't recall it.
You, I'd like to go back to something that you said. I think when you were your experience in Mumbai, where afterwards you said, you know, I knew I'm not queer, or I knew I wasn't.
I knew that I liked that, but I was definitely not what he was.
So what did that actually mean in terms of? Can you explain what you meant by I wasn't queer, or?
I saw queer or gay as something very negative. As somebody's sick. When I was in high school, I used to remember going to the York Library and looking up, I don't know if I looked up queer or homosexual, I don't know, but I spent more than one visit at the library looking that up to see what it was, and then when I found it, it was not me, it was, because they talked about how sick it was, and these sick people and what they have to go through to change that, and it wasn't me, but I felt the need to go in there and check that out, and I did it on more than one occasion. So I came back here and got married, started teaching in Harrisburg, taught there 1 year and went for my fellowship, and came back and got a job as an elementary school teacher, and then spent 5 years in the governor's mansion, teaching in the governor's mansion.
Your mic has turned down. Okay, you.
And during my marriage, I don't remember when the first one was, but it was in men's rooms of malls, men's rooms of markets, men's rooms of wherever. I'd go in and watch guys masturbate. And no one ever touched me. Absolutely no one ever touched me, but I would watch them and then run. And then I found a store that sold pornographic magazines for queers. There was actually one very close to my house where I lived with my wife and my kids. And I would go in there and page through the magazines. One time I even remember buying one and taking it home. I don't remember where I hid it or what I did with it there, but I got it. I can even picture the guy the reason I bought it, I can picture right now the guy that was in that magazine. So I don't know how often it happened, but it did happen in restrooms. And I don't recall them ever touching me.
Do you recall how old you were at that time?
In my early 20s. in my early 20s. My wife and I married when I was 22. Was married for 6 years. We divorced when I was 28. Then about our 6th year of marriage, I was downtown Harrisburg in the square. There was a store down there, a news store, that sold magazines for gays, for queers. And I was in there, and there was a young black male who was there also. I don't know if he was looking at magazines too, but I could tell we were eyeing each other up. And I finally left the store, and so did he, and he was kind of following me, and I don't know how it happened, but he ended up in my car. I'd never done that before. I didn't know what to do with him. He was in my car, and I didn't know what to do with him. So we drove, and we drove, and we drove, and it was no longer just a quick no name. It was a person. There was a person there. And I don't even recall that we even had sex that time. But we dropped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know to stop. If we stopped, somebody would stop. A cop would stop us. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. But we must have driven for an hour, just talking. And he was younger than I. I was probably 27 at the time, 28, and he was like maybe 20. He was a student at Hack. Overnight, I was queer. Overnight, that was my coming out. Overnight, I was queer. Overnight, every part of my body was, oh my God. I cannot tell you the release. It was like being born again. It was like being born again. It was no longer a faceless, nameless person. There was a person there behind this, and it was, I really knew from that moment on, I was a queer man, and I was okay with that. Not only okay, that's who I am. That's who I am. I didn't know what I was going to do about it, though, because I had a very loving wife, a wonderful family. I didn't know what I was going to do about it.
It's a good place to pause, too.
Got to do it again.
I don't know. We're not getting this right somehow.
I know I'm going all over the place here, but
No,
it just
no,
makes
it's
sense.
good.
This is fantastic.
Well, I can't get that to stand up. This is all on tape, by the way. This fooling around. Okay.
That's a fantastic.
Okay.
As long as the first
My-
one that's been fooling around with me in a long time. Don't cut that.
I won't.
So there was this person. We actually met a couple times. Once, while my wife and the kids were at the shore with my folks, I brought him to my house, to my dad, with her parents living directly across the street. Now, what kind of sex we had, I couldn't tell you, because I didn't know from gay sex. I didn't know what it was. I just know that I liked his body against mine. I couldn't tell you what we did. There was no oral. There was definitely no anal. I can't tell you what we did. But it was, having that body against me was just like, so I knew I had to tell my wife. I knew I had to do that. I knew this was not. So one day we were headed back from visiting, from having dinner with some Indian friends of ours, down towards York somewhere, driving back, and it was, I don't even know how long it was since I knew. It wasn't long. It wasn't long. Once I came out, I was out. I told her on the driving on the way back. So she kept saying, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong?" I finally told her. And then I told my brother, my twin brother. I went down there and I said, look, I gotta tell you something, but for right now, we're gonna keep it between the two of us. And I finally, we were in the car, and I finally shared it with him. And he literally said, open up your door, and he literally kicked me out of the car. Kicked me out of the car. And went immediately down to my parents in York and shared it with my parents. So I got a call from my father. My parents wanted to see me. So I drove to York. It was just my father and mother there at the time. And we were in the family room. And I never saw my father cry. He just rolled on the floor. He couldn't stand up. He just rolled on the floor. They offered me everything. They said, look, it's your teaching. You got to stop teaching. We'll pay for you. Go back to school. Go back to school. Come work for me. Move out of Harrisburg. We'll buy you a home down here. They offered me anything. And of course, there was nothing they could offer me that was going to change things now. So, I finally, when she told her parents, we finally separated. I moved out, moved into some kind of a rooming house somewhere, I think. She was a teacher also. We were both teachers, so we weren't making a lot of money. I moved out, and that wasn't working, and we decided we're going to work it out, that I was going to go back and be the husband and the father, but I could go out and do my thing, and that would keep that out there, and I'd come back, and that didn't work. I think it maybe lasted about a month. It just didn't. That's maybe works for some people. It didn't work for us. And so we separated. And very shortly thereafter, we divorced.
When did you tell your kids?
Oh, my son and my daughter. My daughter was just born. They were both very young. My son was maybe 4. I remember once when I came home, I had wire-rimmed glasses. I think I was still living there at the time. We were separated, but I was still living there. I came home, and then my glasses were laying on a nightstand by the bed, and they were all twisted up. He was twisted up. He was so angry. I can't tell you when they found out. I can't tell you. I'll pick up on that later. So we divorced. I moved out, and I was single for 2 years. But I was never alone. I felt so cheated that I threw 28 years of my life away. That's what I was feeling. Part of what I was feeling. I had at least one man a night. There were a few men in Harrisburg that I didn't have. I was that sexually promiscuous. I just went out and did everything. I just went out and picked them up everywhere. When I first moved away, I didn't go to bars. I didn't know where people met, but I found out. And then someone took me to the Tally Ho in Lancaster. And I remember my first bar in Harrisburg. But for my first 2 years, I was a total tramp. Why I didn't pick up anything then, I don't know, but I was. And then I met my first lover. And we were together after the first night we met. I did a lot of traveling those first 2 years. I had some other gay guys who were good friends of mine, and We traveled to Philadelphia, New York, DC, Baltimore, and it was cheap to do that because we always stayed in the baths. We'd go out and party in the clubs and go to the baths and have one after another. And one of those guys, I finally got an apartment with him, and we were best friends. We once, when we first met, tried to have sex, and it was just nothing. It was not good at all, and we were just good friends, and we moved in with each other. And one night we started playing, and we were really playing, having fun with each other, and having. We slept together every night, and just really was enjoying experimenting with all different kinds of stupid stuff, sexually. But on weekends we'd go out and do our other thing. We'd go to Philadelphia, meet a guy, but I was kind of falling for him, and no, he was out partying. And then I met my lover, and I met the guy who would be my lover, and we were inseparable after that. And I spent a lot of nights at his place. And one night, the guy I was living with pulled outside the townhome of the guy that I was dating, and blew the horn until I came out. And I came out and got in his car, and he took me a ride, and he said, "This is it. You make your decision now. You pick that guy you're up there with, or you come with me. Otherwise, it's over. It's over." So I said, "Okay, goodbye." He dropped me off at the house, and that was it. So I was with my lover for 6 years. In 1980, I was living in Harrisburg up until 1980. We had a lot of, my lover and I were, it was 4 years in Harrisburg that we were together, and we had a lot of our regular friends, but most of them were straight couples. But we did a lot of partying. We did at that time every kind of drug that you could do. Did a lot of drinking. We did it all. One winter, we were in. I was in real estate at the time. For the first 2 years that Mick and I got together, after I came out, I was still at the governor's mansion, and then I thought, this is not going to work. I'm a gay male. I'm out here in the real world. This is probably not going to work. Education's not going to work. I need to find something else, and I got involved in real estate. I forgot where I was going to go with that. So this group of friends ended up in my lover and I bought a townhome off of Lingelstown Road, and a brand new townhome, and we were sitting that one snowy evening in our house, partying, I'm sure, and there were all of us. There were like 12, 15, 20 people there, and saying, this is ridiculous. Every winter we go through this. Let's go down to Fort Lauderdale. There's a lot of gay people down there. And let's go down, and we got on the phone that night and made reservations for a week or two in advance, ahead of that we were going to come down to Fort Lauderdale. There were 6 of us, I think, went on that trip. We came back. Now my lover and his sister had a beauty salon up on 6th Street in Harrisburg. We all had, the other 2 guys were from Baltimore. They had professional jobs in Baltimore. There were a lot of professional people. We all did. The 6 of us that were down there decided, okay, we're moving to Fort Lauderdale. And that one week of not doing much but clubbing, we decided we're moving to Fort Lauderdale. We came back, we sold houses, we quit jobs, went down there with nothing. None of us had jobs. There were eventually 12 of us that moved to Fort Lauderdale. One straight couple, and the rest, we were all couples. We were all couples, and we were down there with my lover. 2 of us went down first. One of the guys from Baltimore and I went down to find places to live and get jobs. We got an apartment for 4 and had 4 people stay in this one 2-bedroom apartment, tiny little place. I got a job bartending at a new Marriott that opened up, and he forgot what he was doing. And then the rest of them followed. So we moved to Fort Lauderdale, and that was right after the time of Anita Bryant, where they went through that Anita Bryant. It was right after she lost her contract with the Orange's contract. So there was a lot of gay stuff happening down there, but it was still a small community. It was a tri-county community with Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach, and there was a club or two in each of those cities, and so you travel from city to city. Everybody would end up in Miami, or everybody would end up in Fort Lauderdale, or wherever. But when my lover and I moved there, we quickly knew everybody. It was pre-AIDS. We knew everybody. We would go to the clubs and we knew everybody. My lover was would like to be DJ, so he was really into the music scene. And we met.
We did.
So we knew everybody. We did a lot of partying. And then people started getting sick. When I moved there, he discovered drugs more so than I did. I mean, we were doing drugs up here, but I mean, he really got into drugs. And I discovered Latinos. And I fell in love, head over heels, with a young Latino. He was 13 years my junior. I moved to Florida when I was 35. Juan was 23. Now, when my lover and I were together, it was the late 70s, early 80s. It was after Stonewall, although I didn't know anything about Stonewall then. I didn't know about Stonewall. But gays were just really discovering who they were, and that they could do what they wanted to do, and we partied. So there was sex everywhere. I can tell you there were parties in Harrisburg and parties after we moved to Miami where before I moved to Miami, we spent one summer in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. 4 of us got a house down there. My lover and I and the 2 guys from Baltimore. We got a house down there, and we were there every weekend. And we had parties back after the bars closed with 20, 30, 40, 50 guys, all naked. And it was free love. It was free love. Those were the best of times. Those were the worst of times. It was not as promiscuous for me when we moved to Fort Lauderdale. I had relationships, but my lover and I always had an open relationship, very open relationship. Now that would not always work. Either he would get upset because I got involved, or I would get upset because he would get involved. But mostly it worked. We go out looking together and usually come back with someone together. But after I discovered Latinos and Juan, that was the end of my relationship. We tried to make a 3-way relationship work. Really, it never really worked. Juan and Mickey never really connected. So eventually Mickey and I separated. My lover and I separated, and Juan and I were together for 2 years. Now I was kind of roaming around, lost down there with jobs. I was bartending in Marriott for a while, and then I tended bar in gay bars, a couple of gay bars. That wasn't working out. I did landscaping. I did painting, interior house painting. I did interior wallpaper. I wallpapered the mother of Jordache Jeans, her condo in Bow Harbor. So there are lots of other jobs I did. In 1987. A friend of mine was a director of a vocational college, and he needed a substitute teacher, and he brought me in, and that was where I returned to education. I started there for a year, and then I thought, you know, this is where I really need to be. So I got a job in public education. I got a job as a teacher. Now, that was back in 1987. AIDS began to peer its head down there in the early 1980s, and one by one, someone was getting sick. And I can recall one time coming home and my parents telling me about a friend of theirs, their son in Philadelphia was sick, and there was this scary disease going around, and they were very, very worried about me. I said, Mom, you're just, you know, I passed it off because it wasn't a big deal. People were getting sick and they didn't know what it was about, but it wasn't a big deal for me, and I just trying to calm her nerves. But one by one, friends of ours down there died. When I moved to Fort Lauderdale, within a year, I knew everybody. My last year there, I know very few of those people that I knew when I moved there are still alive, because I lost so many friends in the 80s and 90s. So many friends. My lover, the guy that I moved to Florida with, eventually died of AIDS in the early 90s. Juan, I just found out a year and a half ago that after I moved back here, that he's had AIDS since in the 1980s. He's been on meds and he's doing very well, but I didn't know that. Juan and I were together for 2 years. So that was a really, really scary time. I cannot tell you how many funerals I went to. I cannot tell you how many times I sat by the deathbed of friends that were dying. Florida politically was beginning to change because more and more people were moving there. More and more people, even with the sickness, more and more people were moving there. So I was teaching, started teaching.
Here or in Florida?
In Florida.
Okay.
I started teaching in Florida. Again, back to education and teaching. I taught in elementary school special needs kids for 2 years, and then was picked up by a district. Now my district, right now there are over 300 schools in my school district. Down there the districts are by county, and there are over 300 schools. I was in elementary school, and I was picked up as part of the reading cadre for the team to teach teachers how to teach reading. And then in '89, I became a staff development trainer for the beginning teacher program. I trained literally thousands of individuals per year in what is effective teaching. I taught beginning teachers, I taught their support teams, and I brought their administrators how to evaluate teachers. And I did that for 6 years. In 1995, I became an assistant principal in an elementary school. And I was an assistant principal in 3 different schools until I got my own school. So I left Florida when I retired in 2012 as an elementary school principal. Now, when I became a principal, there was a quasi-gay administrators, people who were involved in administration in the county. We would meet in clubs and bars or even people's homes, but it was under the table. But you know, Florida was one of the first school systems in the country that added sexual orientation to their equal rights. That was back in the early 90s, I believe. But right now, every piece of documentation that comes out of school or county must have at the bottom, including sexual orientation. But even then, you weren't open. I understand now. I had a call from my assistant principal about 6 months ago. They now have a specific organization, an open organization for gay administrators in Florida. It's come a long way. Although Florida doesn't have gay marriage yet, they're working on it. I moved to Wilton Manors in 1998. Wilton Manors was a sleepy little town in 1998. It had one gay bar, but it was a little working man's community. I stayed in that same townhome since 1998 until I retired in 2012. It is now, in fact, it were recently designated as the retirement community for gays in the country. The retirement community. And that town is completely transformed. There were all kinds of low-rises, high-rises homes built. When I moved there, there was working man's homes. A lot of minorities. There were a lot of Haitian people, a lot of low-income people. Not anymore. Every business, literally, is gay-owned and operated. The restaurants, gay-owned and operated. You can't walk out, you can't go to the grocery store, you can't without seeing couples, male and female couples, holding hands, walking down the street. It's just a great place to live. It's a great place to live. It's a transformation. And I moved away from that.
What brought you back north?
I have 2 kids, 5 grandkids. My grandkids were growing up without me. Every vacation I came up here. I literally decided, and I shared this with Lana at one of our meetings 6 months ago. I decided to retire May 2 years ago. I decided in 1 month, I decided, okay, it's time for me to retire. After briefly meeting with a financial advisor, he said, "You're a fool not to," when he found out my age. He said, "You're a fool not to." And he showed me how it was very viable. So within 1 month, I signed my retirement papers, I sold my home, and I bought a home up here in 1 month. So there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. It was a very quick decision. I miss it every day. I miss it every day. But I'm adjusting up here. I really have made a huge adjustment up here.
Would you say that you and your kids are close?
We're very close. My daughter is my right arm, my left arm. She does everything she can to, because she knows how difficult my first year was here. Last year was not so bad. My first year here was very difficult. The weather, that was difficult. I'm used to 365 days of sun. Down there you pray for a rainy day so that you don't feel responsible like you have to go out and do something. In the first year, winter, there was no sunshine at all. It was just like every day was darker than the day before. Last year, even though it was for you people, it was a very rough winter. Every year, even though it snowed a lot, the sun was out every 3rd day. It was a lot of sun, and it's the sun that I live on, thrive on. You asked me earlier about my kids. After I moved to Florida, my son came down sometime my son visited me before he got married. In fact, my son went to the University of Florida for 6 months. He hated it. He didn't like it at all. And besides, he had a girl back here, a girl that he eventually married. But he came down there and he met all the. I lived in a compound for about 7 or 8 years. I lived in a compound with 2 of the guys that moved down there from Baltimore. There were 3 apartments there. They owned the property. I had a place they had a place on one side, I had a place on the other side, and another guy lived upstairs. It was a huge property with a lot of lawn. We all had at least 1 dog. There was a pool, and we were literally inseparable. So when my kids came down, they stayed with me, but they were exposed to everybody that was there, and we did not lead an undercover life. They were. My daughter's first visit, where she actually stayed with me. Now, my folks, for their time were wealthy. For their time, they lived in a big home in York County. For their time, it was a big home. Compared to the mega mansions now, it was not. But they also had a home in Jersey Shore, Ocean City. That's where we summered. And then after all the kids left home, they bought a home to winter down in Stuart, Florida. All of their lives, they took a couple weeks in Florida, but they finally bought a home down there in Stuart, Florida. So frequently when they came down, my kids would stay up there as well. My daughter's first visit, she had relatives from her mother's side in Boca Raton, which is not far away. And she had, I don't know what it was all about, but it was, I guess, some of the gay guys that she met. She was young at the time. She might have been in 8th grade. She left and flew back here, and I got the worst letter I've ever gotten from anybody from her. Just a scathing letter about what an awful time she had and what an awful person I was. And it was an awful letter. And I saved that letter for years. So one day I was cleaning up my closet, and I was looking at this letter, and I thought, why am I doing that to myself? That's not our relationship now. My daughter is... My son and I don't communicate a lot, never have. But when we see each other, we've never missed a beat. When he was born, his first 2 years before his sister was born and before I came out, he never went to bed without me rocking him to sleep, without me singing to him, ever. I was a very good father when I was home. My wife allowed me to keep the kids when I was living in Harrisburg, and they never stayed overnight, but we would go out for meals, and they would come to my home. But she was pretty tight about that, about my life that she was. She met my lover, she knew my lover. They knew my lover, but she said, when did I tell them? I never told them I was gay. I never told them. When she told them that, I don't know. Even when they were down there, we never talked about gays. But they both certainly do now. I mean, they've both been to clubs to me. My son and his wife, my daughter-in-law's an actress. She went to Juilliard, and so when she was at Juilliard, my son got his doctorate from Polytech in Brooklyn. And so they have a very large townhome in Brooklyn, Brownstone. So I would make a lot of trips up there, and we'd go to the theater, and we'd go to the clubs in there. And so they're very New York sophisticated. I don't know that I've ever had that conversation, a coming out conversation with them. I think that it's just something I don't know if their mother ever has. My ex-wife is probably one of my best friends, has been a staunch supporter most of my life. There were a couple of rough years. It took us a while to get to that point, but she's been a huge supporter.
Do you think it's because you started as friends that this was able to
Say that
happen?
again?
Do you think it's because you
That's a
started
good
as friends?
question. Probably so. Probably so, because we liked each other.
How about your siblings? Your relationship with them?
Um,
Because we last left off with your brother kicking you out of the car.
we had a lot of rough years. You know, whenever I came up here, I would see them. Um, I would stay with my parents. Actually, right after I moved to Florida, I didn't come up here very often. I couldn't afford to. I was in and out of jobs, and I couldn't afford to. I didn't come up here very often, but when I did, I always visited the whole family, but I was an outsider, or I felt like an outsider. When I lived in Harrisburg with my lover, my parents met him on more than one occasion, and they were very nice to him. I can remember a conversation I had with my father in Fort Lauderdale. We were at a restaurant at the Galleria in Fort Lauderdale. And this is after I had been down there for a year. This might be maybe the late 80s or early 90s, probably early 90s when I actually had a career again. Sitting having a very nice dinner, and it was beginning when gays were beginning to be in your face gay. My father said to me, now he would never talk about it. I didn't want to hear about it. One rule in my house growing up was you never talk about religion, you never talk about politics, and he was absolutely serious about that. So anything political he wouldn't get into. But he said to me one day, having dinner with my mother, why do you guys always have to tell everybody about it? Why can't you just be gay and just let it go? Why do you have to? And we had a conversation about that, and I wasn't probably very nice about it. So every time coming up here, I was an outsider. I felt the outsider. I felt like the outsider. I would come up, they would welcome me. Like holidays, they would buy me gifts, include me in that. But I always felt like the outsider. I don't know when my relationship with my brother began to change. My brother was married for 25 years to the same woman. They have 3 kids, all very successful kids. One's an attorney. 2 of them are on the international business. One was stationed in Hong Kong for I don't know how many years. He now lives in California. The other is now over and is responsible for the entire Asian quarter for the Smith Klein. It was one of the drug companies, but they both have really huge jobs. It's very successful. His wife was her father was owned a steel company in down in York County, so she came into money. My brother, and my other brother-in-law, my sister's husband, and my other brother would go to Atlantic City and start gambling when they got gambling in. And gambling led to some other things, to some drugs, and it also led to women. My brother met a woman and left his wife. And so one day while he was seeing this other woman, still keeping the wife at home, and she didn't know. He was telling me about, and I just thought, there you are. You kicked me out. You are disgusted with me because I'm gay, and here you are. I have a wife at home, a family at home, and you're running around with some woman. I don't know if we ever had that conversation. I had a conversation with myself, but eventually our relationship turned around. He finally divorced that woman and married this other woman, and they were married for 25 years. I had a very close friend in Baltimore who owned a restaurant in Baltimore. And one day, my brother and his new wife went to this restaurant. Didn't know that I knew this lady, and he went in. They were sitting at the bar, and Reggie was there, and she came over and said, "I got to ask you. You don't look so much like him. Do you know Don Fitz?" And that was pretty much the beginning of right about that time, the beginning of our friendship again. We started talking, we started communicating. Whenever I came up here, he insisted, my brother, when he was married to his first wife, they raised their kids in York, Pennsylvania. After he divorced his wife, he moved to Lancaster with this woman. And whenever I came up here from Florida, I insisted that I come over there and spend some time with them. And my brother died 3 years ago from cancer. We were very close that last 6 months. I came up here and spent a lot of time with him. We were very close at that time. So he did eventually come around. We talked about a lot of stuff. And, so that brings us up to
the present. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to talk about?
we talked about my daughter. She does everything to get me involved. She's taken me to my first gay wedding. Here in Harrisburg. She this winter got me involved. She saw this on Craigslist that they were looking for victims. They were doing some emergency responder training at the Gap. They were looking for victims. So she thought that might be interesting to keep me busy for a week-long experience. She'll do everything to keep me somehow tied here. She's taken me to the gay men's chorus. She's taken me to my only gay bar I've ever been to in Harrisburg. I moved back here not knowing a single person. We didn't keep any of the people that we kept in contact with. The gay people that I kept in contact with are no longer here. I still really don't go out to gay bars. I'm really not. I don't have a lot of gay acquaintances. I have no gay friends back here. I have straight friends. I had one contact back here. In fact, when I finally decided to move back here, my daughter called this person who was a friend of mine, a straight friend of mine, for years with my lover and I. He introduced him. I knew her through my lover. We were very close, but we kind of lost contact over the years because she doesn't fly. So she never came to Florida. The first couple of years, whenever I came back here, I saw her. But then, especially after I started having grandkids, when I came back, my time was all taken. I was spent with family. I had family in New York, I had family in Harrisburg, and I had family in Lancaster, so I was just on the go from every time I came back here. So I didn't keep in contact with any of the other friends back here. So I had lost contact with her. My daughter called her when I moved back here to find out I wanted a realtor and I wanted somebody who was gay friendly. So she's been my introduction back to new people back here, to some old friends back here. She's been my introduction. Whenever I wanted to do something that I didn't have anybody else to do it with, I would call her. She's married, and married to a black guy. She's a walker, married to a black guy. She passed away a week ago. So that was a big 9 years and then died overnight.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
So I'm making some. I got connected to the History Project. Was my first with the center. That was my first introduction to the center. I went to Aging with Pride last week for the first time. The town scares me. We had 2 senators attacked last week. downtown. The town physically scares me with the crime. It scares me. So really, I don't go to the bars. I have some straight friends, a lot of family, and I have Jackson.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You need to do some winding down here.
So, what do you see the next few months looking like for you?
I'm beginning to reestablish my roots back here. I do have some friends. We go to the theater. They're straight friends. I'm actually not quite sure about that. There are two guys, cousins, who live together, have lived together for years. But they've grown to be straight, that's fine with me. But their orientation doesn't involve me at all, so. But they have liked a lot of the things that I do. They like nice things. They like the theater, they like music. One is a musician. So whatever they want to be is fine. They're perfectly comfortable with me. They know who I am, know my history. They were good friends of mine, the girl that passed away. John kept busy with family, and my dog has been a savior.
How did he come into your life?
Everybody in my school, the last school I had, were really pet people. Really pet people. Mostly dog people. And my assistant that I've known for 10 years just insisted that I get a dog. But I was, as a school administrator, your job is 24/7. Living alone, and I was not close to the schools, so would have spent most of his time by himself. So I just thought that was not a good idea, not a good idea. But I always knew that once I retired, I would get a dog. I would get a dog. So it was my first December at home that I started looking online, and I knew I wanted a cockapoo because a lot of folks in my school had poodle blends, labradoodles or but the cockapoo is what because I wanted a lap dog really, and I was assured that Jackson was going to be a lap dog. He doesn't know that he's not. He's too big for a lap dog. So December a year ago, I went with one of the straight guys to check out dogs, and I found Jackson.
That was a year and a half ago.
That was a year and a half ago, December a year ago.
So why'd you name him Jackson?
I don't know. I don't have any idea where that came from. It fit. It does fit. I have no idea where that came from. None. I don't know anybody named Jackson. I have no idea where it came from. It's not tied to anyone, consciously anyway. But I've always been a pet person. I've always had pets, except for a 10-year span. My last pet was 98, my last pet. One time I had a dog and two cats. So I didn't know how that was going to go. And then I realized when I got Jackson, that's a commitment. That is a commitment. So he got me through my first winter, really. And he's taken over my soul. He's finally wormed his way into my bed, and I've never had a pet in a bed before. My cats tried to, and that didn't work. But he's finally wormed his way in there. So now he spends most of the day up in our bed.
Funny how that happens, isn't it?
But I have been single since 1984.
Oh.
I've had a number of longer-term relationships. I've had a number of short-term live-ins, but they kind of moved in after a day or two, and I had to say, no, this is not working. This is not working. I don't know that I could ever live with anybody again. I don't know.
Did you ever think that you would see gay marriage legalized in your life?
Never. Never. In fact, I said that my daughter took me to my first gay wedding. That wasn't exactly true. Back in the 1980s, two guys got down there had a wedding ceremony. And they had a wedding, and everybody brought gifts, and it was, I think they lasted a month together. But it really was not on the top of anybody's agenda. Even, a lot of gay people down there was, why are you fighting for gay marriage? Who wants that? I never, the world is too much with it. It's just moving so fast that 30 states.
I read a piece the other day that talked about when interracial marriage became, the Supreme Court took that up as a consideration. And the piece said that they waited until the majority of the states had outlawed their anti-miscegenation laws, I guess you call them, before they took up the case. I think that's probably going to be the same way with gay marriage before they...
Is that right?
Yeah. So even though the majority of the country was against interracial marriage, the fact that 39 states had stricken those laws gave them an ability to enter into the frame of things and to outlaw that.
Loving v.
Virginia. Which I think were one of several cases I think they were looking at the time, but that's happened over the span of my lifetime, as I recall it as well. Yeah, so I think that probably the next couple of years we'll see the Supreme Court taking it up and really outlawing those anti-marriage laws across the country.
Yeah, I think it. When I can remember people down in Florida saying, why would you even want that? Well, when you think of all the benefits that straight people have had for years, that married couples have had for years. I told you I was at the Aging with Pride last week to see Stonewall Uprising. And there was a discussion group after the movie, and one of the ladies, somebody talked about the Voice, which is a local magazine, a local journal for reporting on gays, and I had never seen it before. So I picked up a copy, and last night I was reading on the front page about this case where a woman, about the 15% inheritance tax.
Yes.
She lost her spouse, and she was going to have to pay 15% on that. And now that the law is passed in Pennsylvania, it's okay to be married. They were common law married, had a common law marriage, and so they're going to make that retro, and she will not have to pay that tax.
Oh, wonderful.
The woman who wrote that article, the woman who that article was about, was at the meeting the other day.
Ah.
I forget her name, but it's on the front page of the Voice. She was there to watch the video. So things are changing so quickly.
We had two women marry at my parish 2 weeks ago.
In State College?
In State College, yes. Actually, there are 5 of us churches that are open and affirming. And my church is the Episcopal Church in State College. And
is there a large gay community up there?
A fair, I wouldn't say a huge community, but it's mostly a younger community with the students. where things happen on campus predominantly. There's a community, I'm going to say, of I'm going to say maybe 100 or so of us in State College, but mostly a fairly closeted community still, which is interesting given that it's a college town. So,
Yeah.
but it's also a very rural area, so I think that makes a difference as well.
You need to be interviewed.
You said that before.
Yeah, I think the community, there was a large community here when I left than there is now
Right.
in Harrisburg.
Yeah.
A larger gay community, a more visible gay community.
Yeah.
I was very comfortable being gay in Harrisburg before I left.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting how, and I think the employment aspects of Pennsylvania have really changed so dramatically that the populations have become smaller than they used to. But Pennsylvania seems to be an interesting place where communities go in and out of being closeted or being very open. And there's no rhyme or reason, I feel. You would think that as time goes on, communities would become a lot more open and accepting, but for whatever reason, forward and a couple steps back and then forward again. Kind of.
Well, I didn't realize until just the other day, Kevin, that it's illegal to be gay in many communities in this state.
Oh, you can be fired. Exactly.
It's literally illegal to be gay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The House Bill 300 and Senate Bill 300 that will never seem to get out of committee to address those issues, where you have small pockets of communities like Philadelphia, State College, some others that basically have passed protection ordinances, but by and large of the state, it's still a troubling situation.
Honestly, I felt that when the governors did not repeal, that it was all political move.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. I mean, he did not want this to be an issue for his election at all.
So,
So are we ready to wind up?
We are.